Welcome to English Rise. This channel exists for people who want to improve their English while transforming something deeper at the same time. Not through noise, not through hype, but through calm, reflective, psychological content designed to train your listening, your focus, and your ability to stay present with difficult ideas. If this kind of long-form English helps you grow, both in the language and in life, consider subscribing to the channel and staying with us. Now let's begin. Part 1. Why most people want change but repeat the same year. Every year begins with intention. New goals, new plans, new promises. And yet, for most people, the year ends almost identical to the last one. Not because they didn't want change, but because wanting is not the same as restructuring life. Most people attempt to add new habits to the same environment that created their old problems. Same routines, same distractions, same coping mechanisms. They try to build a new future on top of an unchanged foundation. And foundations do not negotiate. If 2026 is going to be different, it won't be because of motivation. It will be because something structural changes. Part 2. The hard truth about change no one likes to hear. Change feels inspiring only at a distance. Up close, it feels destabilizing. Because real change requires loss. Loss of familiar routines. Loss of comfort. Loss of identity. You don't just gain a better life. You abandon the version of yourself that survived the old one. Most people avoid this. They want improvement without grief. But every meaningful transformation includes a quiet mourning for who you used to be. Ignoring this creates resistance. Acknowledging it creates clarity. Part 3. Why your environment matters more than your goals. Goals exist in the future. Your environment exists now. And what exists now has more power over behavior than what exists in imagination. If your environment encourages distraction, your discipline will eventually fail. If your environment rewards comfort, your ambition will soften. Most people try to out-discipline bad environments. This works temporarily. Long-term change requires alignment. Your surroundings must support the version of you that you are trying to become. Otherwise, every day becomes a fight. And fights exhaust people. Part 4. The invisible habits that shape your life. Not all habits are visible. Some habits live in your reactions. How quickly you escape discomfort. How often you postpone difficult tasks. How you speak to yourself internally. These habits shape outcomes more than routines. You don't fail because you lack morning routines. You fail because you avoid discomfort in small, consistent ways. Change in 2026 will depend less on what you add and more on what you stop tolerating. Part 5. Why discipline feels heavier at first. Discipline feels hardest before it starts working. In the beginning, discipline only removes pleasure. It hasn't created momentum yet. This phase is dangerous because results are absent but effort is present. Most people quit here, not because discipline doesn't work, but because they judge it too early. Discipline is an investment with delayed return. If you understand this, you stop asking, "Is this worth it?" too soon. Part 6. The role of identity in lasting change. Lasting change is not behavioral. It is identity-based. If you still see yourself as someone who procrastinates, who lacks consistency, who struggles with focus, your actions will eventually align with that identity. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your self-concept. Changing your life in 2026 requires changing the story you silently repeat about yourself. Not affirmations, evidence. Small, consistent actions that slowly rewrite identity. Part 7. Why most plans fail by February. Plans fail because life interferes. Unexpected stress, fatigue, boredom. Plans built on ideal conditions collapse when reality appears. Strong systems assume bad days. They are designed to survive them. If your plan requires high motivation, it is fragile. If it works even when you feel tired, it is durable. Durability matters more than intensity. Part 8. The importance of doing less but better. Trying to change everything at once creates internal conflict. Your attention fragments, your energy scatters, you feel busy but ineffective. Real change is narrow, focused. One or two non-negotiable behaviors done consistently outperform dozens of intentions. Depth beats breadth. Always. Part 9. Why silence is necessary for clarity. Constant stimulation blocks reflection. Noise prevents awareness. If every free moment is filled with content, you never hear yourself think. Clarity does not arrive through consumption. It arrives through stillness. If you want 2026 to be different, you must create space to confront uncomfortable truths. Most people avoid silence because silence exposes misalignment. Part 10. The slow build that actually changes a life. Life rarely changes in dramatic moments. It changes through quiet accumulation. Small decisions, repeated daily, often unnoticed. This is not exciting, but it is reliable. If you commit to the slow build, you stop chasing breakthroughs. You become someone who compounds effort. And compounding is unstoppable. We are only at the beginning. There are deeper layers still. Because changing your life in 2026 is not about doing more. It is about becoming someone different through sustained alignment. Part 11. Why time feels like the enemy but is actually the ally. Most people feel late. Late to start. Late to change. Late to become who they wanted to be. And this sense of delay creates anxiety, which then leads to rushed decisions, unrealistic plans, and the constant feeling that something must happen immediately for life to be worth the effort. But time was never the enemy. Impatience was. Real change does not respond well to urgency. It responds to rhythm, to consistency, to actions repeated long enough for the nervous system, the mind, and identity itself to reorganize around them. When you try to change your life quickly, you overwhelm yourself. When you try to change it steadily, you train yourself. 2026 does not need to be dramatic. It needs to be structured, and structure only reveals its power over time. Part 12. The psychological weight of unfinished promises. Every year you don't change, something accumulates. Not failure, not defeat, but weight. The weight of promises made and quietly abandoned. The weight of goals postponed. The weight of knowing you could do more, but didn't sustain the effort long enough. This weight affects confidence more than any external criticism ever could. By the time people reach a new year, they are not starting from zero. They are starting from accumulated disappointment, even if they don't consciously name it. This is why optimism alone doesn't work anymore. Changing your life in 2026 requires something deeper than hope. It requires rebuilding trust with yourself, slowly, through actions small enough that they don't trigger resistance, but consistent enough that they cannot be ignored. Part 13. Why self-respect is built, not declared. Self-respect does not come from thinking well about yourself. It comes from behaving in ways that make respect unavoidable. Every time you keep a promise you made when no one was watching, something internal stabilizes. Every time you avoid what you said you would do, something internal erodes. Over time, this becomes an identity loop. People who change their lives are rarely more confident at the beginning. They simply become more reliable to themselves. 2026 will not improve because you decide to value yourself more. It will improve because you stop negotiating with your own standards. Part 14. The role of boundaries in life transformation. Most people associate boundaries with other people, but the most important boundaries are internal. Boundaries with distraction. Boundaries with comfort. Boundaries with habits that quietly drain time and energy. If everything in your life is allowed, nothing meaningful is protected. A better life requires saying no more often. Not aggressively, not dramatically, but consistently. Quiet refusals that preserve focus. Boundaries are not restrictive. They are clarifying. They tell your nervous system what matters and what doesn't. Without boundaries, effort leaks everywhere. Part 15. Why energy management matters more than time management. Time is equal for everyone. Energy is not. You can have hours available and still be incapable of focused action if your energy is scattered, depleted, or constantly overstimulated. Most people plan their days without considering how drained they already are. They expect discipline to override exhaustion. It doesn't. Changing your life in 2026 requires designing days that protect mental clarity. Fewer decisions, fewer distractions, fewer energy leaks. A calm, focused mind sustains effort longer than a motivated but exhausted one. Part 16. The truth about consistency. No one talks about. Consistency is not intensity repeated. It is tolerance for boredom. Most of the actions that change a life are not exciting after the first few weeks. They become neutral, ordinary, sometimes dull, and that is exactly why they work. The mind stops resisting what feels familiar. If you only act when something feels meaningful or inspiring, you remain dependent on emotional states. If you act because it is simply what you do, change becomes inevitable. Part 17. Why comparison destroys long-term change. Comparison distorts perception. You compare your beginning to someone else's middle, your private struggle to someone else's public outcome. This creates urgency and shame, both of which sabotage consistency. Life change is not a race. It is an alignment process. The only comparison that matters is between who you are now and who you were 6 months ago, measured honestly, not emotionally. 2026 improves when progress is tracked quietly, not announced loudly. Part 18. The necessity of structured solitude. You cannot redesign your life while constantly absorbing other people's opinions, expectations, and noise. Solitude is not isolation. It is strategic withdrawal. Time alone allows patterns to surface. It reveals what you've been avoiding. It clarifies what no longer fits. Without solitude, you react more than you choose. A better life requires moments where you are not entertained, not distracted, and not performing for anyone. Part 19. Why discipline creates freedom, not limitation. Discipline is often misunderstood as restriction. In reality, it removes chaos. When your actions are predictable, your mind relaxes. When your routines are stable, your energy stops being wasted on constant decision-making. Discipline frees attention. And attention, once freed, can be directed toward growth instead of damage control. In 2026, freedom will not come from doing whatever you want. It will come from no longer being controlled by impulse. Part 20. The long view that makes change possible. Life does not change in weeks. It changes in seasons. If you zoom out far enough, small actions become massive. If you zoom in too closely, effort feels pointless. The ability to hold a long-term perspective is what separates those who transform from those who repeat. 2026 will not be better because of one decision. It will be better because of 1,000 small decisions made in alignment with who you are becoming. Part 21. Why most people overcomplicate change to avoid responsibility. There is a subtle strategy the mind uses to stay the same. It complicates everything. By turning change into a complex system of plans, tools, apps, methods, and theories, responsibility becomes diluted. When things don't work, there's always something else to adjust, something else to research, something else to blame. Simplicity removes escape routes. When the path is simple, the only variable left is you. This is uncomfortable. So the mind creates complexity, not to improve results, but to delay accountability. If 2026 is going to be different, it will not be because you found a smarter way. It will be because you accepted a simpler one and stayed with it long enough for resistance to lose power. Part 22. The hidden role of fear in staying the same. Fear does not always feel like fear. Sometimes it feels like distraction. Sometimes like procrastination. Sometimes like overthinking or exhaustion. But underneath, the fear is specific. Fear of commitment. Because commitment removes options. It closes doors. It forces you to confront the consequences of consistency. As long as you remain undecided, life feels open. Once you commit, outcomes become personal. Most people don't avoid change because they are lazy. They avoid it because they are afraid of finding out who they really are when excuses disappear. Part 23. Why your future self depends on boring days. We imagine life change happening in intense moments, but lives are built on ordinary days. Days where nothing dramatic happens. Days where effort feels invisible. Days where showing up feels pointless. These days shape identity more than any breakthrough ever will. Your future self is being trained on boring days, not exceptional ones. If you abandon your standards on ordinary days, you teach yourself that effort is conditional. If you maintain them quietly, you build someone who can be trusted. 2026 improves when you stop underestimating the power of unremarkable consistency. Part 24. The internal dialogue that decides your direction. Change is preceded by language. Not the language you speak out loud, but the language you use internally when things become uncomfortable. The moment you feel resistance, a voice appears. It negotiates. It rationalizes. It delays. If you always believe that voice, your life remains unchanged, regardless of how many plans you make. Changing your life in 2026 requires becoming aware of that voice and choosing, again and again, not to obey it. Not through force, through calm refusal. Part 25. Why discipline feels lonely at first. When you change your behavior, you separate yourself from old patterns, old routines, and sometimes old relationships. This creates loneliness. Not social loneliness, but psychological distance. You no longer fully belong to who you were, and you haven't yet become who you are trying to be. This in-between space feels uncomfortable. Many people return to old habits not because they miss them, but because they miss familiarity. Understanding this makes loneliness survivable instead of confusing. Part 26. The quiet power of self-respect accumulation. Self-respect is cumulative. It grows through repeated evidence that you can rely on yourself. It does not appear suddenly. It compounds slowly. Every day you act in alignment with your standards, even when it feels insignificant, you deposit something into that internal account. Eventually, Behavior changes because not acting would feel like loss. This is when discipline stops feeling heavy and starts feeling natural. Part 27. Why you must design for your worst days, not your best. Most plans are designed for high-energy days, but your worst days decide your trajectory. When tired, stressed, or emotionally drained, you revert to default behaviors. If your default environment supports growth, progress continues. If it supports avoidance, momentum collapses. Designing for bad days is not pessimism. It is realism. And realism is what sustains change. Part 28. The moment you stop waiting for confidence. Confidence is not a prerequisite for action. It is a byproduct of action repeated under uncertainty. Waiting to feel ready delays everything. Those who change their lives act without certainty, then allow confidence to catch up. 2026 will not reward hesitation. It will reward those willing to move without guarantees. Part 29. Why peace is a better goal than happiness. Happiness fluctuates. Peace stabilizes. A well-structured life does not eliminate difficulty, but it reduces chaos. When your actions align with your values, your mind becomes quieter. Peace is not excitement. It is coherence. And coherence allows long-term effort. Part 30. The version of you that 2026 is waiting for. Your future is not waiting for motivation. It is waiting for alignment. Alignment between what you say matters and how you live daily. That version of you does not need to be perfect. It needs to be consistent. Part 31. The final shift. From wanting a better life to living one. At some point, something changes. Not externally, internally. You stop asking whether your life will improve and start acting as if improvement is already required. This is not optimism. It is acceptance. Acceptance that no future version of you is coming to save you, and no perfect moment will appear to make change easy. What arrives instead is responsibility. Quiet, heavy, liberating. And once responsibility is accepted, life begins to reorganize itself around your decisions. Part 32. Why clarity is more important than certainty. Most people wait for certainty before acting. Certainty never comes. Life is built under incomplete information. Those who change their lives learn to move with clarity, not guarantees. Clarity about what matters. Clarity about what no longer fits. Clarity about what must be protected. When clarity is present, doubt loses its power. Part 33. The moment discipline stops feeling like force. Discipline feels like force only when it conflicts with identity. When your actions match who you believe you are becoming, discipline becomes alignment. You stop negotiating. You stop explaining. You simply act. This is not rigidity. It is coherence. And coherence creates calm. Part 34. Why a better life is built in private. Transformation is quiet. It happens without applause, without validation, without witnesses, and that is why it lasts. When improvement is not performative, it becomes stable. 2026 will reward what you do consistently, not what you announce publicly. Part 35. The true measure of change. Change is not measured by excitement. It is measured by stability, by how you respond on difficult days, by how quickly you return to alignment after deviation, by how little drama is required to keep moving. This is maturity. Part 36. What remains when everything settles? When routines stabilize, when identity aligns, when resistance loses strength, something remains. Calm. A quiet confidence rooted in evidence. Not hope, not motivation, but trust in yourself. Changing your life in 2026 will not happen through sudden inspiration. It will happen through quiet decisions made repeatedly, long after excitement fades, through standards upheld privately, through discipline practiced without drama, through patience with the process. This is what English Rise stands for. Here, English is not just a language you learn. It is a medium through which you train focus, discipline, listening, and self-mastery. If you stayed until the end, thank you. Your attention is not accidental. It reflects seriousness. And if this kind of deep, calm, reflective English content helps you grow, both in the language and in life, consider subscribing to English Rise and continuing this journey with us. Not to rush change, but to build it.